17 beings had died on Thessara 4 in the last 12 hours. The Galactic Union had footage from their helmet cameras. Officials watched it once, classified it immediately, and scheduled therapy for everyone in the viewing room. The Vorath was hunting again. In every known database across civilized space, this creature held a single distinction. Nothing survived meeting it. Not armed soldiers, not armored vehicles, not even automated defense systems. The Vorath stood 4 meters tall at the shoulder, moved on 6 legs that bent in directions that made no biological sense, and possessed skin that shifted colors faster than eyes could track. It could become invisible against any background. It could hear a heartbeat from 2 kilometers away. Its saliva dissolved metal. The Galactic Union had tried everything. Traps failed. Poisons failed. Hunters became prey within hours of landing. Eventually, the Union simply quarantined any system where a Vorath was confirmed. It was easier to abandon entire planets than to fight these things. Thessara 4 was one such world. A jungle moon circling a gas giant officially listed as forbidden. The survey team had landed illegally, hoping to find valuable minerals. They found something else instead. Their distress signal reached 3 vessels within range. 2 changed course immediately, fleeing the system at maximum speed. Their captains would face no penalties. Running from a Vorath encounter was considered basic survival instinct. The 3rd vessel was a small cargo hauler called the Quiet Dawn. Ruth Delacroix sat in her pilot's seat, listening to the transmission. Screaming, weapons fire, something large moving through vegetation. Then a sound she had never heard before, a kind of clicking mixed with a low vibration that seemed to bypass her ears and settle directly into her bones. Then silence. Her ship's computer displayed the statistics automatically. Survival probability for anyone still on that moon, 0.3%. Survival probability for anyone attempting rescue, 1.7%. Recommended action. Continue current heading, report incident to authorities, do not engage. Ruth was 54 years old. She had been hauling cargo through frontier space for 30 years. She had seen pirates, plagues, and political upheavals. She had buried 2 husbands and raised a daughter who now lived on Earth, a daughter she hadn't seen in 4 years. Because the shipping routes never quite aligned with her schedule. She had never been particularly brave. She had never been particularly foolish. She had simply lived her life one delivery at a time, following the safe routes, avoiding the dangerous contracts. But she had heard the screaming in that transmission. Young voices, terrified voices. Ruth changed course. The Quiet Dawn entered Thessara 4 atmosphere as the moon's sun began to set. Below, endless jungle stretched in every direction, broken only by rivers that gleamed like silver threads. Beautiful, if you didn't know what lived down there. Ruth followed the beacon to a clearing where the survey ship had crashed. The vessel was torn open, metal peeled back like something had wanted to see what was inside. Bodies lay scattered across the ground. Ruth counted 15. The transmission had mentioned 17. 2 might still be alive. She landed the Quiet Dawn at the clearing's edge and activated every external light her ship possessed. Vorath were ambush predators. They preferred darkness, preferred surprise. Ruth intended to give them neither. She stepped outside with a medical kit and a flashlight. No weapon. Weapons hadn't helped the survey team. Weapons just made the Vorath angry. The jungle was silent. No insects, no night birds, nothing. Every living thing on this moon knew when a Vorath was nearby. Ruth found the first survivor behind an overturned cargo container. A young Kellyan, barely out of adolescence, with 3 of his 4 arms badly wounded. He was unconscious but breathing. Ruth checked his vitals, stabilized what she could, and prepared to move him. That was when she felt it. Not heard, felt. A pressure in the air, a sense of being watched by something ancient and patient and utterly without mercy. Ruth turned slowly. The Vorath stood at the tree line 30 meters away. Its skin rippled between shades of black and deep green, never quite settling, never quite visible. 4 eyes reflected her lights, gleaming like cold stars. It was larger than she had imagined, larger than the footage suggested, a nightmare given physical form. It watched her. Ruth's heart hammered against her ribs. Every cell in her body demanded flight. Her legs trembled with the urge to run. Instead, she looked directly at the creature. She met those four terrible eyes, and she spoke. "I'm just here for the wounded. I'm not hunting you. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just trying to help someone who's hurt." Her voice shook. She couldn't help that, but she held her ground. The Vorath tilted its massive head. That clicking sound emerged from somewhere in its throat, softer now, almost curious. Then it settled back on its haunches and simply watched. Ruth turned back to the unconscious Kellyan, her hands trembling as she worked. She kept talking, explaining everything she was doing, filling the silence with human words. Behind her, the deadliest predator in the galaxy did not attack. It waited. 3 hours passed before Ruth dared to breathe normally again. The Kellyan's name was Pross. She learned this when he regained consciousness and immediately began screaming. Ruth had to cover his mouth with her hand, whispering urgently that he needed to stay quiet, stay calm, stay absolutely still. "It's here," Pross whimpered through her fingers. "I can smell it, the Vorath, it's still here." "I know," Ruth said. "It's been watching us, it hasn't attacked." Pross stared at her like she had grown a second head. "That's impossible. Vorath don't watch, they hunt, they kill, that's all they do." Ruth glanced toward the tree line. The creature had moved twice during the night, circling their position, but it had come no closer. Its four eyes still gleamed in the darkness beyond her ship's lights. "Maybe this one is different," she said. She helped Pross to his feet. His wounds were severe but not fatal. 3 broken arms, multiple lacerations, possible internal bleeding. He needed proper medical facilities, but he could survive the trip to her ship if they moved carefully. They made it halfway across the clearing before Pross froze. The Vorath had emerged from the jungle. It stood directly between them and the quiet dawn, a wall of muscle and predatory intent. Up close, Ruth could see details the footage never captured. Scars crisscrossed its hide. One of its rear legs dragged slightly, wounded. Its breathing was labored, wet wrong somehow. This creature was old, and it was hurt. Pross collapsed beside Ruth, his legs giving out from pure terror. "We're dead," he whispered. "We're already dead." Ruth stepped forward. "What are you doing?" Pross grabbed at her with his one functional arm. "Don't." She shook him off gently and walked toward the Vorath. 10 meters, 5 meters, close enough to see the individual scales of its shifting skin, close enough to smell the copper and ozone scent of its breath. The creature lowered its head until those 4 eyes were level with hers. A rumble built in its chest, something between a growl and a question. Ruth raised her hand slowly, showing empty palms. "You're hurt," she said. "I can see it, your back leg, something's wrong with it." The Vorath's eyes narrowed. Its skin flickered through colors, red, black, deep purple, warning colors Ruth guessed, threat displays. "I'm a healer," Ruth continued. Her voice sounded steady now, which surprised her. "Not a very good one, but I've fixed broken things before, ships, engines, people sometimes. I could try to help you." Silence stretched between them. Then the Vorath shifted its weight and slowly, deliberately, lay down on the jungle floor. It extended its wounded leg toward Ruth, exposing the injury. Behind her, Pross made a sound like a dying animal. Ruth knelt beside the creature's leg. The wound was old, weeks at least, and badly infected. Something metallic gleamed deep in the flesh. Ruth leaned closer and recognized the design. A Union capture trap, the kind bounty hunters used. Someone had tried to take this Vorath alive. They had failed, but they'd left their mark. "This is going to hurt," Ruth said. "I need to remove it, the trap, it's poisoning you." The Vorath's eyes never left her face. It made no sound, no movement. Ruth took that as consent. The extraction took hours. Ruth worked with basic tools from her medical kit, cutting away infected tissue, prying the trap's barbed teeth from muscle and bone. The Vorith remained perfectly still throughout, though Ruth could feel tremors running through its massive body. Pain. It was enduring tremendous pain, and it was trusting her to make it stop. When she finally pulled the trap free, blood and pus gushed from the wound. Ruth cleaned it, treated it with antibiotics meant for human physiology, and wrapped it in bandages that looked ridiculous against the creature's scale-covered leg. The Vorith rose slowly. It tested its weight on the treated leg, then turned those 4 eyes back to Ruth. And it made a sound. Not the clicking, not the growl, something new. A deep, resonant hum that vibrated through Ruth's chest and settled somewhere near her heart. It felt like gratitude. It felt like recognition. Pross was crying when Ruth returned to him. 40 years, he said. 40 years studying xenobiology. They don't communicate. Vorith don't communicate. They've never needed to. Ruth helped him stand. She looked back at the creature watching them from the clearing's edge. Maybe, she said, no one ever gave them a reason to. That night, Ruth built a fire near her ship. Pross slept inside, sedated and recovering. The Vorith settled at the edge of the firelight, close enough that Ruth could hear its breathing. She talked to it about her ship, about her daughter, about the loneliness of space and the way stars looked different depending on where you stood. The Vorith listened. And for the first time in recorded history, the galaxy's deadliest predator chose not to hunt. Days passed on Thessara Roman 4, and Ruth began to understand something the Galactic Union had missed for centuries. The Vorith was not a monster, it was simply alone. She discovered this gradually through observation and patience. The creature never strayed far from her camp. It slept nearby, curled into a massive spiral of scaled muscle, its 4 eyes dimming but never fully closing. It brought her gifts, small animals from its hunts, laid carefully at the edge of the firelight each morning. At first, Ruth didn't know what to make of these offerings. Pross, recovering slowly in the ship, was horrified. "It's trying to fatten you up," he insisted. "Predators do that, they feed their prey before the kill." But Ruth had watched the Vorith for days now. She had seen the way it moved, the way it watched her with something that looked almost like curiosity. This wasn't hunting behavior. This was something else entirely. "It's sharing," she said, "the way a wolf shares with its pack." Pross laughed weakly. "Vorith don't have packs. They're solitary. They kill anything that enters their territory, including other Vorith." Ruth looked out the ship's window at the creature resting in the morning light. Its skin had settled into a pattern she hadn't seen before. Soft grays and gentle browns, colors that meant nothing in terms of camouflage or threat display. "Maybe that's why it's alone," she said quietly. On the 5th day, Ruth made a decision. Pross was stable enough to survive the trip to the nearest medical station. She could leave. She should leave. Her cargo was overdue, her employer was sending increasingly angry messages, and her daughter had tried to call twice. Instead, Ruth walked out to where the Vorith lay and sat down beside it. The creature's head rose slowly. Those 4 eyes focused on her with an intensity that would have terrified her a week ago. Now it just felt like attention. "I've been thinking," Ruth said, "about why you let me help you, about why you haven't killed us." The Vorith made that humming sound again. Ruth had started to recognize it as acknowledgement, a sign that it was listening. "The Union calls your kind monsters, mindless killers, but you're not mindless, are you? I've seen you thinking, planning, deciding not to do things, which means you're choosing, and if you can choose." She trailed off, unsure how to finish the thought. The Vorith rose to its feet. For a moment, Ruth thought she had said something wrong, but instead of attacking, the creature turned and walked toward the jungle. It stopped at the tree line and looked back at her. An invitation. Ruth followed. The jungle of Thessara Roman 4 was beautiful and deadly. Poisonous plants grew beside flowers that smelled like honey. Insects the size of her fist buzzed through shafts of green-filtered light. Everything here wanted to eat everything else. But nothing bothered Ruth. Nothing even came close. The Vorith walked beside her, and every living thing in the jungle gave them space. They walked for an hour before the creature stopped at a clearing Ruth had never seen. In the center stood a structure, ancient and overgrown. Pillars of stone arranged in a careful circle, covered in carvings that had mostly weathered away. Ruth approached slowly. The carvings depicted creatures that looked like Vorath but smaller, more varied. Some stood upright. Some had different numbers of legs. Some appeared to be holding tools. "This was yours," Ruth whispered. "Your people, they were here." The Vorath settled beside the largest pillar and made a sound Ruth had never heard before. It was low and mournful, a vibration that seemed to come from its very bones. Grief, the creature was showing her grief. Ruth sat down beside it, her back against the ancient stone. She didn't speak. There were no words for this, no human language that could bridge the gap between their species. But she stayed. She bore witness to a sorrow that had lasted, perhaps, for centuries. When the sun began to set, the Vorath rose and led her back to camp. Pross was waiting, terrified that she had been killed. Ruth calmed him and promised to explain later. That night she sat by the fire in the Vorath, closer than it ever had before, close enough that Ruth could feel the heat radiating from its body. "You're the last one," Ruth said. "Aren't you? The last of your kind on this world, maybe the last anywhere." The humming sound, agreement. "And everyone who comes here tries to kill you. Hunters, scientists, survey teams, they see a monster, so they act like you're a monster and you have to defend yourself." More humming. Ruth reached out slowly and placed her hand on the creature's flank. Its skin was warm and surprisingly soft, the scales giving way beneath her fingers. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry for all of it, for what my galaxy has done to you." The Vorath's head turned. Those 4 eyes met hers in the firelight. And then, very gently, it pressed its forehead against her shoulder. Ruth closed her eyes and let the tears come. Somewhere in the jungle, night birds began to sing for the first time since she had landed. Even they could tell that something had changed. The Galactic Union ships arrived on the 12th day. Ruth heard them before she saw them, the distinctive whine of military engines cutting through the atmosphere. 3 vessels, heavily armed, descending in formation. Someone had finally responded to the original distress call, someone with enough firepower to glass the entire moon. The Vorath vanished into the jungle the moment the ships appeared. Ruth understood. Everything it had ever known about visitors to its world told it that these ships meant death. She stood alone in the clearing as the vessels landed. Soldiers poured out in full combat gear, weapons raised, scanning the tree line for threats. Behind them came officials in clean uniforms, their faces pale with barely concealed terror. A tall Kellian in a commander's uniform approached Ruth. His eyes kept darting toward the jungle. "You're the human from the cargo ship," he said. It wasn't a question. "You've been here for 12 days. The survival probability for that should be 0. "Math doesn't always account for everything," Ruth said. "Where is it?" "The Vorath. Our scans showed one in this area." Ruth crossed her arms. "Gone. It left when it heard you coming. Strange how it knows to run from Union ships." The commander's expression hardened. "That creature killed 15 beings, your own kind among them. It's a menace that needs to be eliminated. It defended its territory against intruders. That's not murder, that's survival. You're defending it." The commander stepped closer, disbelief written across his features. "You're defending the deadliest predator in the galaxy." Ruth met his gaze without flinching. "I'm stating facts. Those survey teams came here illegally. They knew the risks. The Vorath didn't hunt them down. It responded to a threat in its home." "This is insane. The creature is an animal, a beast. It doesn't deserve consideration." "Then why did it let me help it? Why did it bring me food? Why did it show me the ruins of its civilization?" Silence fell over the clearing. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. The commander's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "It's civilization." Ruth told them about the stone circle, the carvings, the grief she had witnessed in a creature everyone assumed was mindless. By the time she finished, the commander looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under his feet. "That's not possible," he said weakly. "We've studied Vorath for centuries. They're not intelligent. They can't be." "You've hunted them for centuries," Ruth corrected. "You've tried to capture and kill them. When has anyone ever tried to understand them?" Before the commander could respond, movement rippled through the jungle at the clearing's edge. The soldiers raised their weapons instantly, the distinctive whine of charging energy cells filling the air. The Vorath emerged from the trees. It walked slowly, deliberately, its skin cycling through colors Ruth now recognized as peaceful, soft blues and gentle greens. It passed the soldiers as if they didn't exist and stopped directly beside Ruth. Then it sat down. The creature's massive bulk settled onto the ground, its 4 eyes fixed on the commander. It made no aggressive movements. It showed no teeth, no claws. It simply sat waiting. Ruth placed her hand on the Vorath's shoulder. "This is what peace looks like," she said. "It could have killed all of you before you even saw it coming. Instead, it's sitting here because it trusts me, and I asked it to." The commander stared at the scene before him, a human woman standing beside the galaxy's most feared predator, her hand resting casually on its hide. Everything he knew about Vorath behavior said this was impossible. Yet here it was, happening before his eyes. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Protection for this moon. No more hunting expeditions, no more capture attempts. This world becomes a sanctuary, off limits to everyone. You're asking me to protect a Vorath. I'm asking you to correct a mistake that's lasted centuries. Your ancestors tried to destroy a species because they didn't understand it. Now you have a chance to do something different." The commander looked at his soldiers, at the officials behind him, at the jungle that had claimed so many lives. Then he looked at the Vorath, sitting peacefully in the shadow of its ancient enemy. "I'll need to contact my superiors," he said. "This is beyond my authority." "Take your time," Ruth said. "We'll be here." The Vorath hummed. The sound carried across the clearing, gentle and warm. For the first time in memory, Galactic Union soldiers lowered their weapons in the presence of a Vorath. And the Predator simply watched them with those ancient, knowing eyes, waiting to see if peace could finally survive. Ruth delivered her cargo 3 weeks late. Her employer fired her. She didn't care. The galaxy had noticed what happened on Thessara Roman 4. News channels across 100 systems played the footage. A human woman standing beside a Vorath, her hand on its shoulder, facing down armed soldiers without fear. The image spread faster than any story in recent memory. Scientists demanded access to study the creature. Hunters offered Ruth fortunes to help them capture other Vorath. Governments proposed using her technique to weaponize the predators. Everyone wanted something. Ruth wanted none of it. She returned to frontier space, found another cargo job, and tried to forget. But the calls kept coming. The messages piled up. Her daughter reached out for the first time in months, not to reconnect, but to ask if Ruth was really the woman in the news. 3 weeks after leaving Thessara Roman 4, Ruth found herself staring at a blank navigation screen in her new ship. The Quiet Dawn was gone, sold to cover the penalties for her late delivery. This vessel was smaller, older, barely capable of the long hauls she needed to survive. She thought about the Vorath, about those 4 eyes watching her with something like trust, about the way it had pressed its forehead against her shoulder in the firelight. She thought about loneliness. Her finger moved across the navigation screen. Destination, Thessara Roman 4. Flight time, 6 days. Legal status, the moon was now classified as a protected sanctuary. Unauthorized landing was forbidden. Ruth changed course anyway. She sent a message to her daughter during the journey, not about the Vorath, not about the fame or the fortune or the chaos she had left behind, just 3 words, "I'm sorry." Then she turned off her communication systems and watched the stars pass in silence. Thessara Roman 4 looked different from orbit. The Union had installed monitoring satellites, warning beacons, defensive platforms. Everything pointed outward, designed to keep threats away from the moon. Nothing watched for someone trying to get in. Ruth landed her ship in the same clearing where everything had begun. The wreckage of the survey vessel was gone now, cleaned up by Union crews. Only her old fire pit remained, a circle of blackened stones in the grass. She stepped outside and waited. The jungle was louder than she remembered. Birds called. Insects hummed. Life had returned to this place, no longer suppressed by fear. The presence of the Vorath had kept everything silent before. Now the creature was somewhere else and the forest breathed again. Ruth walked to the edge of the clearing and sat down on a fallen log. Hours passed. The sun crossed the sky and began to set. She didn't move. Just before dark, she heard it, a rustle in the undergrowth, then silence. A pressure in the air, a sense of being watched. Ruth smiled. The Vorath emerged from the jungle like a shadow gaining substance. It had healed completely now, all 6 legs moving with fluid grace. Its skin cycled through colors she had never seen before, patterns that seemed almost joyful. It stopped in front of her and lowered its massive head until they were eye to eye. Ruth reached out and placed her hand against its forehead. "I came back," she said. "I know I probably shouldn't have. I know there are rules now and people watching and a galaxy full of beings who would kill for the chance to study you." The Vorath hummed. "But I couldn't stop thinking about you, about this place, about what it felt like to be understood by something that had never understood anyone before." The humming grew louder. "I called my daughter before I left, told her I was sorry for being gone so much, for choosing stars over her, for every birthday I missed and every promise I broke." Ruth's voice cracked. She didn't answer. I don't know if she ever will. The Vorath pressed forward, its forehead pushing gently against her palm. "I have nowhere else to go," Ruth whispered. "No job, no family, no purpose. Just this ship and these stars and the memory of a creature who chose not to kill me." The creature's eyes, all 4 of them, gleamed in the fading light. It made a sound Ruth had never heard before, a soft, rhythmic clicking that seemed almost like a question. She laughed despite herself. "Are you asking if I'm staying?" The clicking continued. Ruth looked at the jungle, at the sky, at the ancient predator waiting patiently for her answer. "Yeah," she said, "I'm staying if you'll have me." The Vorath rose to its full height and made that deep, resonant hum that vibrated through Ruth's entire body. Then it turned and walked toward the jungle. At the tree line, it stopped and looked back. Ruth understood. She stood, brushed off her pants, and followed the galaxy's deadliest predator into the darkness. Behind her, the stars came out one by one, and her ship sat empty in the clearing. She wouldn't need it anymore. 5 years changed everything. Ruth built her home at the jungle's edge, a modest structure made from salvaged ship parts and native wood. The Union had officially granted her sanctuary status, the first human ever authorized to live permanently on a Vorath world. Scientists visited quarterly, always supervised, always respectful. They had learned more about Vorath biology in 5 years than in centuries of hunting. The creature Ruth called Old Grey wasn't alone anymore. 3 juvenile Vorath had appeared over the years, drawn somehow to the sanctuary. They were smaller than Old Grey, barely 2 meters at the shoulder, with skin that hadn't yet learned the complex color patterns of adulthood. The first had arrived starving and terrified, fleeing hunters on a distant moon. Ruth had found it collapsed in her garden, too weak to run anymore. Old Grey had approached the newcomer slowly, that deep hum vibrating through the air. The juvenile had responded with clicks and whines, a language Ruth was only beginning to understand. By morning, it was sleeping beside the fire, Old Grey's massive body curled protectively around it. 2 more followed in the years after. Word had somehow spread, in ways Ruth couldn't explain, that there was a place where Vorath could be safe, a place with a human who didn't hunt. Today, the Galactic Union was sending a delegation to commemorate the Sanctuary's 5th anniversary. Ruth watched their shuttle descend through morning mist, Old Grey resting. Beside her porch, The juveniles had retreated to the jungle at the sound of engines, still too wary of strangers. The delegation leader was a young human, born on a colony Ruth had never heard of. She approached with careful steps, her eyes fixed on Old Gray's massive form. "Guardian Delacroix," she said formally, "the Union thanks you for your service to interspecies relations." Ruth snorted. "I'm not a guardian. I'm just an old cargo hauler who found something worth staying for." The delegate smiled nervously. "Nevertheless, your work here has changed how the galaxy views Vorath. The hunting moratorium has been extended indefinitely. 3 other sanctuary worlds are being established." Good should have happened centuries ago. Old Gray lifted its head and regarded the delegate with those 4 ancient eyes. The young woman went very still. "It won't hurt you," Ruth said. "It's just curious, doesn't see many new faces out here." The delegate swallowed hard. "I have to ask, Guardian Delacroix, the question everyone wants answered. What have you learned? After all this time living beside the galaxy's deadliest predator, what do you understand that we don't?" Ruth was quiet for a long moment. She reached down and scratched the rough hide behind Old Gray's sensory cluster. The creature hummed with contentment. "You know why everyone calls them the deadliest predators," Ruth said. "Because they're good at killing, fast, strong, nearly invisible when they want to be, built for hunting in ways that make most species look like children playing with sticks." The delegate nodded. "But you know what nobody talks about? In all those centuries of hunting and killing and dying, not once did a Vorath attack without reason. Not once did they hunt for sport. Every death was defense. Every kill was survival. They never chose violence when peace was possible." Ruth looked at Old Gray, at the scars covering its hide, at the gray creeping through its scales. "Humans have done far worse. We've killed for land, for gold, for ideas. We've slaughtered each other over the color of our skin and the names we call our gods. We had the choice all along, every single time, and we chose blood anyway." The delegate was silent. "Old Gray here could have killed me the first night, could have torn me apart before I even knew it was there. Instead, it watched. It waited. It gave me a chance to prove I was different." Ruth's voice softened. "The moment I showed it peace was possible, it chose peace. Instantly, without hesitation. After centuries of being hunted, it was still willing to trust." She looked at the delegate with eyes that had seen too much to be impressed by titles or ceremonies. "That's what I've learned. The deadliest predator in the galaxy was never the monster. We were. And the moment we stopped acting like monsters, it stopped treating us like prey." Old Gray hummed. The sound carried through the jungle, deep and resonant. Somewhere in the green distance, younger voices answered, the juveniles responding to their elder. The delegate stared at the scene before her, a weathered human woman sitting beside an apex predator, surrounded by the sounds of a family that had no right to exist. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Ruth smiled. It was the first real smile she had worn in years. "Now we keep choosing peace. Every day, every moment. We teach these young ones that not all strangers are enemies. We show the galaxy that the things we fear most are often just lonely." She stood and stretched. Old Gray rose beside her, a mountain of muscle and ancient wisdom. "Come on," Ruth said to the creature. "Let's introduce our guest to the kids." She walked toward the jungle without looking back. Old Gray followed, then paused and looked at the delegate with something that might have been invitation. The young woman hesitated. Then she took a breath and followed them both into the green. Behind her, the morning sun broke through the clouds, and somewhere in the sanctuary, a Vorath that had once been called the deadliest predator in the galaxy taught its adopted family how to live without fear. The galaxy had spent centuries trying to destroy these creatures. One human had shown them how to save them instead. And that perhaps was the most human thing of all.